Welcome. I'm your host, Paula Scatoloni, the founder of Transformative Harmonics, a podcast that offers listeners a synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern science. Good morning. Welcome back to Transformative Harmonics, a podcast where we're blending ancient wisdom and modern science. I'm so excited to be back today. I'm kicking off my first episode with a guest, someone who I'm thrilled to sit and we just called it a fireside chat. So we're going to have a fireside chat together. And I'm just thrilled. I hope, as I noted in some of my earlier conversations, that you also have a cup of tea or are sitting in a space where you can allow whatever we say in this conversation today to wash over you. And what needs to land will land, and what doesn't might be there for later, and you can take another bite at another time. So welcome back. I would like to introduce our guest today, someone who I'm thrilled to get to know, or kind of starting to get to know each other a little more. I'm going to just read her bio. Laurie Stalker Jackson. She lives in Asheville, North Carolina. They. Laurie is a ritualist and embodiment guide. She's the founder of the Relational, Somatics, and Ritual. Laurie, like myself, is a somatic experiencing practitioner. She's also trained, like myself, in transforming touch. And she is a gene key guide, which is my new favorite thing. She's accompanying people in self-exploration of archetypes, of heart coherence, and of soul nourishment to support the maturation through initiation and grief. As a white-bodied descendant of colonial settlers to Turtle Island, she carries the complexity of cultural reckoning and repair alongside devotion to secure relating and reciprocity with the land, her Slavic and Gaelic ancestors, and the sacred. Welcome, Laurie. I love your bio. It's so rich, and it really fits the person that I've met as I get to know you. So I'm excited to learn more. I do want to preface this as well. You know, people who know me know that I have a background in psychology and somatics, and I talk a lot about sound on this podcast. But you know why I picked Laurie as my first guest, because I do feel like we both have very similar background and overlap in how we're holding the changes in the world and the changes that we're all engaged in. And I thought it was a nice way to start before we get more specific with some of the other guests. And as I mentioned, very excited about the Gene Keys. And we had this meeting Laurie's in my mentorship, and I realized she was a Gene Key guide. And so it sparked some conversations, and we started to realize, wow, this is a great component to bring into the mentorship. And so I'm hoping we can take a dive into that today. So welcome, Laurie. I'd like to give you a little space. Of course, my first question that I don't think we've even had this part of the conversation yet because I've met you in my program, but we don't always get to the nitty gritties of, you know, how did you end up on this journey? And, you know, you're traversing, because you've heard my journey of somatics and psychology and sound and then the Gene Keys, which is what we'll talk about a little bit more today. So if we could kick off there, I would love to hear a little bit about your journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Paula, for having me. I'm really excited to be here and excited about what we're talking about. Definitely.
Me too.
And as far as my journey, I'll stay on the brief side and then feel free to ask more details around anything. So my somatics journey officially, I guess, began as I became a massage therapist in 2006. And I did that for years until I decided to become a mental health practitioner. And so I became a clinical mental health counselor. In 2014 is when I graduated from school. And I went right into somatics. And interest in somatics and trauma healing through that. And what I realized now or throughout the journey was what I was really looking for was what has happened to my heart. I wanted to learn about the depths of the relational piece, because relationships were where I seem to experience the most significant difficulties in life with myself and with others. And it was kind of a vague mystery to me. So I thought, oh, it's trauma. And so I got somatic experiencing training and then began to discover somatics that dealt more with developmental trauma and attachment ruptures. And so that's when I really started to light up like this. Okay, these things are speaking to my hurts, my difficulties, my barriers, things that I haven't quite had an understanding and now I know the needs met and the nourishment given for the development to grow and continue. And so all of that kind of progressed between then and now. And then I think it was maybe 2016, a friend introduced me to human design, which is the origin. I get the gene keys emerged out of human design. They're very different from each other. The gene keys is much more esoteric, but my first introduction was to human design. And then one of the pieces of my design and makeup is an investigator. It's one of the primary ways that I lead with. And so I dove right in as deeply as I could and found every podcast I could. And that's where the gene keys came rolling in. And I was like, wait a minute, as they're talking about this, there's this depth. There's this things that seemed to me a little flat because of how I was receiving them, suddenly held more of a spectrum. So the archetypes, which are each gene key, started to reveal this spectrum, what's called a spectrum of consciousness in the gene keys, where there's a shadow frequency and a gift frequency, and then the siddhi, which is this divine flowering frequency of an enlightenment, basically. And so that resonated so much with my values or makeup, the way that I see things. Like I've never been able to fully see black and white and right and wrong. I wanted to, it would have made things easier, but I never could. And so I found, oh yeah, everything holds all of this. And so that drew me like a moth to a good flame. And so I'll kind of just, should I deepen kind of into the gene keys part specifically at this point?
Well, let's pause there on a few things, because I did want to just note, like many therapists that I know and myself, there is a archetype of the wounded healer, or this idea that, many of us on this journey of self-evolution are on our own path. We're helping other people, but we're also trying to figure out ourselves. And I do feel that is what makes a good clinician, is your willingness to keep going back in, because you can only take your client as far as you can go. So it demonstrates your commitment to being able to take your clients all the way through by you engaging. So that's a point for people who might be listening, if you're choosing providers, of picking people that are doing their own work as well. So, beautiful. Your story parallels mine in some ways, of just following the breadcrumbs, right, of what lights you up. So you came through the body and into emotions and relationship and the gene keys, and I guess human design, the archetypes. You began to understand yourself through archetypes. And so, what came next?
What came next along in there also was the opening of an anti-racism piece for me. That, and I say that because it's huge, and that it really began to return my connection to the collective. So these attachment wounds and emotional wounds are not just me and my caregivers or me and my significant relationships. They're me and my people, me and my lineage, me and my land. The harms that were done to my people historically that pass epigenetically down, the severance of basic needs of a people, of culture and land and communal relationship and relationship with the sacred, that severance is as significant of a trauma as what can happen within a single family unit. And so those missing pieces in somatic experiencing, what we would call like undercoupled things that were not even in my awareness, began to get hooked back into my my consciousness, and I started to have even more clarity about, oh, that is also developmental trauma. That's developmental trauma of a lineage and of a culture, and ultimately of a collective people, because my people are, settler, colonial, adopted into whiteness, and perpetuated harm as well. So I'm not just holding the wound of a victim, like literally, I'm also carrying a lineage wound of perpetration and of amnesia and forgetting, which is what allows that. So that to me deepens and spreads the actual, like what I've come to realize, the belonging. The wound got bigger and more spread out and wider, and there's a lot of grief there. And right there is the belonging and the holding, and even more sacred. So that's been a journey for me for the last 8 or 9 years. And then really since the pandemic, 2020, going into deepening with a teacher, a decolonial teacher, guiding for, white-bodied folks, and how to unlearn some of the lack of relationship and systems of domination and control that are characteristic of like colonialism and supremacy culture, and also deepening into how to be a healing practitioner, specifically therapist, but in general healing practitioner, not replicating systems of domination and control on my clients. And so that's just part of my story that really matters to me, because it's infused into the deepening of my relationship with the sacred and the unseen world and ancestors and land, because we really are all in this ecology of care that's available to all of us. And so that's where I was like, I want our bodies. I want my body began to experience through, even through some of the first safe and sound protocol journeying that I did with you as a group, of like the yielding developmental movements, the yielding into the support of the earth.
Yes.
And that benevolence and love.
Yeah.
And that's our original attachment figure.
Yes.
And so that I have chills just like remembering the relief and love, like not even the question of deserving love, like goes away when my body is in that embodied experience of that. And I can feel it right now, I belong, we belong. And so funny, my mind just went blank. It was like, oh yeah, that's enough.
Yeah. I feel like you did a circle and then landed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And that's such a beautiful story about your evolution. And the things that percolated for me was this awareness that we hold it all. We hold it all in our body. We hold our narrative. We hold our ancestral. We hold the collective, and so it's a downward spiral into that information in all the ways that people are creatively doing that right now. Thank goodness we have a ton of different ways. And then you're bringing in the consciousness of, well, what are we circling around and what are we circling down into? And inevitably there's going to be grief and there's going to be unburdening, if we want to talk from an internal family systems perspective, unburdening and reconciliation, right? With this imbalance that we have perpetuated unknowingly within ourselves, because I always think of the collective as that we're in a fishbowl and it's the water we're swimming in, but you don't know that water's toxic if you're swimming in it and everyone else is in it, right? It's just the water. So that's beautiful. And I'm interested as we get to know each other, as just continuing to create spaces and dialogue with you around that language and how to hold space around that. When we talk a little later in the podcast, we'll come back with the idea of the sacred wound from the Gene Keys, and what that means to sit with our core wounds and consider them as it's kind of a domino across the board into the intergenerational and into the collective. I do like that you also talked about the shadow and wondering, like, do you, we started to play with this idea of, well, so shadow being the unconscious, right, of what we're not aware of, but they also can reflect our strategies of operating, our egoic strategies of operating, and how those show up in a way that can either be overbounded or underbounded, if you want to use embodied recovery terms, right? So in hyperarousal or hypoarousal, this flavor of the shadows. And so let's talk about maybe how you incorporate the Gene Keys into your work, and what that might look like if you were going to take someone or a group, because we'll be doing this in my mentorship, into an exploration of their shadow, or their Gene Key. And just to give an example to the listeners.
Well, I feel it would be maybe it would be different with a group than an individual, but there would be also some commonalities of the Gene Keys approach, which the longer I'm with it, the more I realize what a gift the approach is. And so I'll just name, like, there's this quality of gentleness, inquiry, patience, and contemplation. So, and part of why that's important is that we can't force our shadows to anything. If we go at it with this sense of kind of achievement or urgency, all of those are actually the wounds themselves, the shadows themselves. And so this practice of learning, these will unfold over time as I am with them, with my being, and as I make a place for them to witness them. And it kind of overlaps with this approach of, compassion, welcoming. I even love I will feel it with you. Like, that's how intimate and trusting we can actually be with these shadows.
It reminds me of the same processes that we're cultivating in the sound journeys. The ability to sit in spaciousness, to create space and time. And when there's space and time, the organicity of the system knows how to find its way to wholeness. So it feels like it has that same fundamental principle.
It does. And even just as you said those words, I felt kind of a widening within myself and a resting down into a little more support within myself. Like, that's the kind of embodiment of space and time. And then just tying those also into, like, those are probably two of some of the biggest fundamental needs that were unmet for us in our, own historical experiences were not enough space and not enough time. And so it's kind of amazing what that embrace or environment allows to happen for the shadows or for our parts, or for our strategies, which are all the same thing. I suspect.
Yeah. And I want to tie that back, to, because we have the same background in studying with Kathy Kane and Steve Terrell and Peter Levine. So space and time are, affiliated and support a trauma physiology when there's not enough space and there's not enough time. So when we're talking about these concepts, we're talking about a survival physiology. And if we go back to what Laurie was saying, that is a collective cultural phenomenon. It is an individual one for sure, right? Because we all have our story. But as a collective, we operate in a trauma physiology. And that, I think, is a big part of our message and what we're both pulled to really expand people's perception, to start thinking collectively and less individually about their path of healing, so that they're really hitting all the different levels of what might have contributed to their current stuckness or struggle or sense of disconnection to themselves, to others, to the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So many things are coming up as you say that. I was just listening to one of the Gene Keys people, Tanmayo, was saying yesterday, when I am embodying the shadow, I'm actually in touch with and embodying my whole ancestry, actually, because everyone in my lineage has embodied the frequency of that shadow. And actually, the gene keys themselves are archetypes of humanity. So I'm actually embodying energetically the same frequency of all of humanity. So they're really always all collective and always all individual, which I think is part of this magic of frequency and the holographic nature of things that is part of the wordless knowing that starts to come up with this work. And so that is part of this, the Venus sequence itself, is kind of remembering that, like, I don't have to like personally hold on to and claim these shadows as this is me, this is this archetype living through me. I mean, I'm an animist, so I'm in relationship with all beings are people, are beings. And so I even not allow that. I even perceive that with each gene key. It's an entity, it's an archetype. An archetype is a living thing. It lives through us.
I know this ties back to when we can hold these shadows or our egoic states, what we might call our personality, even with this level of understanding that it is a reflection of something that is a frequency, right? One, it expands this notion of frequency. So it's not just about sound, right? That frequency, and on this podcast, we're going to be talking about frequency in all ways. So that's one. And two, it allows us to bring in that self-compassion that you're talking about, right? And I use this phrase a lot. I might have used it with you. I'm sorry for me. I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry for us, right? Of when we're journeying inside and we hit some of these places that are painful and the grief associated, how do we come in with that witness and that self-compassion to hold that neutral space so that the alchemy of the emotional processing can happen? And I do think that's one of the gifts of the somatic therapist or people that are trained in somatics is they sort of know how to keep people there in that observing mind. And that sound itself also offers us that platform for staying in that observing right brain process to allow these things to just come to the surface on their own. Like we don't have to go dig when we're listening to sound and say, I think I'll process this today, right? We just put the music on and invite that deeper connection. And the subconscious, I keep doing the circular thing, but it just starts to come up, and you yourself in doing the sound journeying have experienced that firsthand of it's like, wow, I didn't even know that was in there. And it's coming to the surface to be witnessed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And something knows how to bring it up, like they're not surprising memories necessarily that come up. It's more just like the body and the emotions and the sensory experience of like actually what it was like to be contextualized in that when it occurred. I've had some with a very young parts, and I've had some with adolescent parts show up, and a witnessing, and some clarity comes, which again is like, oh, out of that yielding comes the push, which is that next developmental movement with the insight and the clarity. I feel like it does itself. If that makes sense. There's an unfolding,
Definitely. Once we find the yield, which is that surrendering into safe relationship, the other movements start to naturally come in on their own. And that's the self-healing mechanism that's already built in to us.
Yeah. Like life lives itself through the developmental movements and that cycle, right? That's life living itself. So life knows what to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But for our listeners, if you don't know about the developmental movements, because we kind of jumped into that, but we'll backtrack back to the Gene Keys. But the developmental movements are something that Rachel Lewis and I taught through Embodied Recovery, and they're based on body-brain bridges work and sensory motor psychotherapy, and kind of the culmination of our early movement patterns with our psychological development. Yield being one of the movements that in this cyclical nature that is associated with our experience of belonging and safe existence. And so when we're using sound or in therapies where we're inviting settling and spaciousness and slowness, we're supporting that process of yielding. But so many of us are built in defense. We're suffering because we're organized in survival. We're not yielding. We're contracted and we're moving really fast. And so slowing down the nervous system to come back into the Schumann resonance, back into that natural rhythm with the earth is part of the work, right, that we're all doing. So I wanted to fill that gap in. Let's go back to the Venus sequence, and because that's where you and I got very excited in the mentorship of like, wow, I think we're kind of already in this category of exploration with people. We're talking about the core wounds. We're talking about the emotional body, the physical body, the mental body. And then the Gene Keys just laid it all out. And I said, wow, okay, here's our map. Here's our map for bringing more organization and structure into what we're already doing in the sound journey. So if you could say maybe a little bit, a snippet about the origin of the person who developed the Gene Keys, where he saw the Venus sequence and what its role is, as opposed to the other sequences, because there's 3 different ways of using it if you're following their classes, right?
Yeah, there's a golden path, and it moves through 3 different kind of areas. And the Venus sequence is the part of the golden path that is related to our relational wounding, or love wounds, I think he has called them, but they're ways that we have closed our heart to love, and loving. I'll just say everyone has their own unique profile in the gene keys that's based on the time and date of your birth. And so, and within that profile, there are what is called spheres. And each of those spheres describes an area of life. And I won't get into what they're correlated with, because that's pretty complex. But 3 of them are specifically related to what you just named: the physical body, the emotional body, and the intellectual body. And they're actually, according to the gene keys, kind of developed most fully in certain ages of our life. And that's in these 7-year increments, which are seen actually in a lot of different systems. And so the first 7 years of life are our physical body. And so 0 to 7, and then from 7 to 14 is our emotional body. And then 14 to 21 is our intellectual body. And what is really being described in those is not so much the wound that we experienced, is the way that the strategy that we developed to protect ourselves from being that hurt, and in attachment therapy, we would talk about the intelligence of that protection. There's not something it's not something wrong with us. That was a very needed thing in the environment that it was in. It makes total sense. And so that's part of how we're, again, holding shadow. And so that these strategies to protect and defend ourselves, that's what shows up in the shadow. And, the thing that I haven't said much about is that this gift and the city are also there. There's no shadow that is alone by itself. And actually in the gene keys, within the shadow, the gift is in the shadow. And even the city, this divine flowering, is actually calling to us from the shadow. So that's part of what to remember too, as we look at these. And so, wondering if I think I'll use an example from my own chart.
I was just about to ask, can we talk about your own process with this?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, they go in a certain order, but I'm going to just share the part that is with my body, which actually, it's also a soul wound. It's like our soul coming into and filling our body. So it's the expression of our self energy within our body and being fully embodied, which we can't really talk about without including soul in it. And so my gene key in that sphere, and this again is from age 0 to 7 that got developed, is gene key 46. And the shadow is seriousness, and the gift is delight, and the city is ecstasy. So I can feel the delightfulness of my very, very young self. Like, I experience it as wonder and ebullience and effervescence. And it's very physical. It's very light and bright. And there's a lot of safety needed to actually be in delight. And one of our developmental needs is to be delighted in. And so we actually, I think we come in capable of delight, but it surely, primes it to come online really well when we're delighted in. Our caregivers have to be safe to be delighting in us. And I have there were 5 kids in the household that I grew up in. My mother was a stay-at-home mom by herself with the 5 kids while my father worked. She was overwhelmed. She was extremely overwhelmed. And I had some, my brothers were adolescent. 2 of my brothers were adolescent when I was born. And so I was kind of a toy. I was kind of like a little doll toy, so I was delighted in, but I was also teased even more. And so I would get teased and then I would get love. And I would get it would be like, first comes the pain, then comes the love. And so I experienced a lot of affection, and it hurt. I hurt. I felt there was I developed like that accommodating and fawning, but really underneath it was this, when I let down my guard and kind of let emerge this bubbly lifeness, I might do something that gets grabbed on and teased about. So the spontaneity that is required for delight, like zapped, like even into adulthood, I would be like, oh yeah, I won't dance unless it's choreography. I will not just move my body, or I won't sing unless it's a song. So that spontaneous expression and playfulness was not available to me. And so that's what the seriousness felt like. The seriousness felt like loss of spontaneity. And I don't think you can have delight without spontaneity.
Mm-mm. I don't either. I think they go hand in hand.
And when I do feel delight, it is my experience when this gene key started to open it was with nature. I'm like looking at one of the trees out my window, our oak tree out back, and all of that green that was in my backyard was the place that it began to kind of crack open for me into almost like life was delighting in me and delighting me. And there was this like feedback loop and the breathe, even just this total sensory experience of light, dappling and moving, and leaves fluttering in the breeze, and the sense of it on my skin. Or like, I remember the rain at one point, like I was laying in the grass and it was raining on me, and each of the raindrops were like kissing me. It was just kiss, 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 just like a parent would do with like a sweet baby, or I do with my puppies, Yeah. And I felt just this young, I think that's ecstasy.
Mm-hmm. It feels like it, even as I hear
chills,
that. Yeah.
I had it's like the beloved. I'm
the
beloved. We're
Yes.
beloved to each other.
Yes.
And it's life,
It's you being in communion with life. It makes me think about the ways in which the gene keys and the sound are both opening up these pathways to be in communion again with the way that we interact with life in a way that supports our expansion. Whereas the shadows support our contraction. And that opening, it sounds like with the gene keys, and from my exploration so far, is about just allowing yourself to sit in the spaciousness and contemplate and be with the words or embodiment or the texture of the dynamics within that key, right? So it's like moving into relationship with it, over time, slowly. And then how I think about the sound and the curiosity of these working together is like, that is, if we are talking about the SSP, it's lubricating the pathways between the inside and the outside so that relationality is available. And so I think of it, I used to describe it like if you were skiing down a mountain and we were creating more snow so you can find those pathways down the mountain more effortlessly into those places where health was, right? Or connection was.
Whew, that feels so right. I'm having an image of kind of how vibration and ringing, even if you just had some sand, you would see it moving the sand and you would know deep down there's like space and new organizations are occurring, and new configurations are happening there. And you also have a sense it's finding its way to the
It's
most
finding its way.
natural, way to be in this context. And I feel like that's what happens with the sound.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the gene keys too, as you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
So delightful. I'm so glad you picked that particular gene key, because different ways to talk about what we do and what many people are doing. Some people call it attachment work. Some people call it inner child work. But I get this sense as you're talking of that inner child, being able to come home and have a different experience than she had in the past. So it's like a homecoming, a welcoming, a retrieval,
Mm-hmm.
right, of parts
Mm-hmm.
of yourself.
Yes. And it's not just me welcoming, it's everything is welcoming that home, As you say it, I'm thinking, oh, I didn't even get into the ancestral delight, and the collective delight. Like, I think everyone who hears that story, many people will understand that that is the natural being of a child. I think we do have a collective knowing. Actually, that gene key happens to be the one that is correlated with that sphere. When we're trying to understand a sphere, there's a gene key that's like, look at this gene key and it'll tell you about the quality of the sphere. And so that's actually everyone's youngest coming into embodiment fully gene key. So it's yours, all of ours as a child. And then each person has their own gene key correlated with their imprint at their time of birth that comes in there also. But mine happens to be the same one. So,
I see.
yeah.
I see.
So I give all of us, yeah.
Is that the same then when Peter Levine talks about vitality? That's his favorite word, and awe and wonder, right? He might even call it the sacred wound as well, right? Of retrieving that impulse, that ability to just follow impulse, right? That's so associated with the child who has not contracted against life. Does that feel like it's the same thing?
It does. It feels like what
Okay.
I've heard called like our pre-wounded self. I think I've heard it called, or the there's like the lost child and the wounded child and the forgotten child, and then I think there's the one who didn't get injured. that's the one, Yeah.
Or a divine child in Jungian perspectives, they might call it the divine child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's so beautiful, and it makes me want to do the work when I hear that experience of yours. Oh, I want to have that. And I love that we have all these pathways to finding our way there. And I wonder about, let's bring this conversation to the collective. Again, I'm still making sense of all the pieces of the gene key, but I have spent some time with the my own process, even before the gene key, and then now of the way we have imprints around the collective wounding, and how those imprints then might show up in our gene keys. And for myself, we could use myself. And so we heard a little bit about you. So let's talk about me. Put that on. So I have number 2 and number 4, which seem to be partners in the collective imprint which is denial and guilt. And so I'm exploring those and what those mean. And it's taking me into places where, again, I've done a lot of work on myself. Many of us have. And, we keep going back to the closet to see, is there some rock or shoe I haven't looked at? And let's pick it up and look underneath it. And I feel like that's what the Gene Keys has been. Like now we're going to take an even deeper vacuum cleaner and go into that closet and collect the cobwebs. So in holding mine, not to put you on the spot, what thoughts do you have about that? I think, for myself, I've been sitting with my personal, my ancestral, and then the collective ways in which I may be in denial and what that does to me and how that might have a ripple effect. And one of the more common struggles that people have that are associated with denial is in the addiction community. And I recently spent a weekend at a retreat where I was guiding people and doing sound journeys, but I also was in a process and observing like, why am I here and what's happening and what am I being called to sit with? And I came into this awareness that I was being taken back into that place of sitting with the ways in which denial may look in my life. And there's certainly addiction in my lineage. And then the ways that might thread through the collective, and the sense of, even though I've recovered, because mine was so long ago, is there still an othering that I do in my own psyche and self so that I'm not in communion with those that are at different phases of that struggle? And if I come into a sense of awareness that we're sharing the imprint of denial and its role in addiction, I stay connected to the people that are still in process with that. And it allows me to be in a more open-hearted space and not go into judgment or separation. So that's kind of how I played with it over the weekend. And it was fascinating because I certainly didn't go to the retreat thinking that was something I was going to be sitting with. It kind of happened, and I was aware enough to realize I don't think I'm at this retreat for the reason I thought I was at this retreat, because I thought I was going to go lead a sound journey. But I don't think that's why I was there. So I just paid attention and sat with it. It was very created. I think some levels of healing happened for me while I was there. But that's an example of how I'm using the Gene Key and that template right now.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And just the way that you described that is how like every gift is in the shadow. That gift of connection and communion. And like with the second line, there's this it's one-on-one as far as kind of like that feedback loop of like, I come into relationship with you and then you give me feedback in some way about me. And then I know I exist or how I impact you. And then I come back with you. And they're actually a current or a flow between relationally can be there. But if we deny that feedback about ourselves, then we stop that flow. And ways that we deny it are the othering or blaming, denying, which, you kind of describe, we can see denial in the other and then judge them, right? And then they don't get to impact us.
Great.
Or we can deny their humanity, or we can kind of deny through withholding compassion or or something
Yes.
like that. Yeah. So, because that, the gift of that is ease.
Yeah.
And the ease is the ease of flow and current, and like really line twos make everything look easy. Like wherever you have a line 2 in your chart, it's like people are like, I don't know how you do it. You're just dancing along. And so that's the feeling of that ease that can be there, which, can I give you some feedback?
Sure. Give me some feedback.
I've experienced you in leading the sound journeys with that ease and flow. Like it's not just you. There's more than you, and you're kind of facilitating it. Like, a leaf on the river, shows you what the river's doing too. So yeah,
Yeah. Fascinating.
yeah, yeah.
So, are there any other pieces that feel important before we wrap up the conversation?
Yeah, there is one piece I would like to bring in. One thing that I really love that I guess I'd like to just bring in to sit with this, the way that we allow that the gift is in the shadow, is this alchemical, just kind of acknowledging the alchemy piece as well, which we haven't named, but it lines up with it perfectly. And I find with alchemy, one, you have to have raw material, the prima materia, which that is the shadow. And that's kind of the rotting stuff that we, refuse, decomposing, the things we do not want. We actually have to have that material for the alchemy into gold for the process to even begin. And so that's the welcoming, the value that we can give to the shadow itself. And then also there has to be a vessel for that to happen in. And that's what I consider each archetype to be, is a vessel that can happen in. So we're not spreading out to all the shadows all over the world at the same time, trying to work with it. We kind of are focused in on just one, just for us, just for the sake of that level of transformation and transmutation can't happen in total chaos. There has to be container. And so that's part of what I am discovering as I learn more about alchemy and like soul alchemy, is that they're structure that helps it be safer to fall apart a little bit. And there is gold in there.
Yes.
Like it is there. Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yes. Beautiful. It reminds me of some other ways that we talk about healing and somatic experiencing, where we're using our mind and placing that intention on a part of the body, creating that container with intention and presence, embodied presence, that allows the alchemy, or what we call in SE, we call it metabolization, but it's alchemy, allows that to happen. And one of the things I'm playing with, and you can let me know if you agree or not, or if this fits, is, and this is, I learned from Rachel, or she talked about it, but I think I finally can see it all now clearly. And it applies to sound too, is we always have these three choices when there's contraction, because you'll call it a shadow, but contraction is another word to think about it. Or places where consciousness and light is not living. So we have a choice. We can either meet it with neutrality, which is the spaciousness and the slowness. We can hold that space and meet it and really feel the frequency of that difficult emotion or archetype. Or we can bring in the opposite to also influence and hold space. So either way, it's about coming into relationship with it in different ways that then allows what is stuck to begin to, it's like when relationship comes in, that stuckness says, oh, there's something here to engage with me. And the conversation then starts. And so it's that relationality which begins the process of alchemy.
Yeah, it's even like Francis Weller would call that the heat.
The heat. Okay.
And I mean, the relationality can be making art with it or dancing, or the attention or spaciousness and presence. That's all
Yeah. So the culmination for myself, and I'm glad to hear, I love Francis Weller's work too, and all these different methods of being with are available for people. And I think it's just a question of what you're drawn to, what feels right for you, what feels resonant, in how you would like to explore deeply your inner psyche and your soma and your patterns. And whether that is through these psychological methods, these communities, and these practices like the gene keys or the sound, they're all supporting the same processes. And I'm so thrilled that we have a place to share this with people now, so they know about our community and how we're creating space for this. And people might come to our community and then they go to another community and try that too, right? Because we just keep moving in the direction that feels right for us. And so one is not better than the other, and they're all valuable. They're just different stepping stones towards evolution and growth. So it's been a treat to share this one with you and sit with it a little and chat we've done this, off camera too. So it's fun to do it on camera.
Yes, Paula, thank you so much for having me. It's really delightful and fun.
Great.
And interesting.
Do you want to end maybe by sharing anything about your practice or where people can find you or anything you're doing so that they can be routed to you if they're interested?
Yeah. I have a membership program that is just getting started. And we provide, there's like a grief tending circle every week, and some embodiment. We call it nervous system nourishment, but it's embodiment practices to support people just maintaining capacity. And then a colleague and I, who both are along these same lines, provide mentorship as far as animism and somatics and ritual practice together, all with this attachment relational lens. And it's called Relational, Somatics, and Ritual. So that's, you can find me at my website is lauriejacksonsomatictherapy.com. And within that is the membership information and details. And then I do one-on-one work with people with gene keys, supporting ritual, and the transforming touch, which is the co-regulating touch in person also. So
beautiful. Lots of choices.
Yeah.
And then you will be part of the mentorship program for those coming in and starting my new mentorship program, which will start probably in August or September. And it's going to be 9 months now. And within that, we'll be having people go through the Venus sequence and have that option to meet with Laurie for a one-on-one during the mentorship. So you'll see more of her in my community as well. Yeah. So thank you. And it's been a pleasure. And I hope that folks reach out. And even if you don't reach out, be sure to check out the Gene Keys. You can find lots on YouTube and at www.genekeys.com, I think is the website. And then check out what we offer, because there's always going to be creative things coming out of my community in reference to this as we continue to explore it. So thanks again, Laurie.
Thank you, Paula. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.